Okay. Did you see it getting recorded on your end
Yep.
too? Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Yeah. But no, I mean, I would just I think when you and I first met too, right? Because it was the conversation about reproductive health, and I think that's how we had connected, right? And then just trying to like, how do you even address that as a Muslim person or as a Muslim health organization or something? And so it's just kind of nice that this is a little full circle, I guess,
Mhm.
with that. But for people's sake as well too, Dr. Umber Khan, could you please tell us, what do you do in your job? Because it's kind of unique. So tell us what you do.
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you so much, Mariam, for offering to interview me and to be a part of Science Jummah, which is an incredible work, alhamdulillah, that you are a part of and doing. And so thank you so much for having me. So the job title, I guess, is that I'm a health educator. So I teach health education, and I predominantly focus on health education to Muslim youth, typically at the middle school age, high school, but then also I do college and adults, and I do focus on a lot of different areas of health. But the main focus is that I do health education from an Islamic framework. So from that Islamic perspective. So it's a little bit more of not just the medical and the science behind physical, mental, social, spiritual, or reproductive sexual health, but it does always come with that, or it aims to have that Islamic framework around it.
And again, I forget now because I know we've talked about this, but what makes you love this job or want to do this job that motivated you that this would be like this is your career path?
When I went to medical school, I think my favorite part of going into the patient's room was getting an opportunity to talk with them and educate them if I could, if I was capable of what their disease was, or essentially preventive health. I think that was one of my favorite parts. I really enjoyed, especially the outpatient clinic setting. And it was not so much the assessment or the diagnosis or the treatment, but it was more on the education side. And so when I left medical school, I ended up going into getting an Islamic degree from Mishka University, and I wanted to focus on my Islamic education after med school. But while I was doing that, I did go into health education, and I would teach at a couple of like I would teach at an Islamic school or my local masjid, and I focused on health education. And so when I started teaching Muslim youth about health education, I think that's when I really realized, oh, this I really enjoy. I enjoy teaching youth about health, and I was bringing a lot of that med school knowledge in, a lot of the information, a lot of the things that I had learned in the clinical settings in med school. And I felt like it brought a different lens to health for youth. And I enjoyed it a lot. And I loved the questions that the youth would ask, the way that they were very sensitive topics, but you could tell how curious. They were so curious, and they just didn't seem like they had an appropriate outlet to ask those questions. And now they were getting this outlet, and they were getting knowledge. Inshallah, that's my hope, is that they were getting knowledge not from just this Islamic framework of this is haram or this is halal, but they were getting more of the wisdom behind Islamic rulings about why alcohol is prohibited and what are the pathological issues that can occur with when you put in certain
Right.
particular substances. Oh, this is the wisdom behind the Islamic ruling. So it's not so much as what we can and cannot do as Muslims, but answering the why Islam may forbid something or why it has particular conditions or boundaries around certain things. It was giving this different light to, especially for someone young who may have certain desires or interests and want to engage in certain things, gave them a new understanding of, oh, this is why I have to have conditions around certain types of things. And I can appreciate that now with that type of knowledge. I think that's what I really love about the job, being able to provide that different perspective, not different perspective, but another perspective when it comes to Islamic education, is including that health in there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That is another way to connect with people almost in a very physical, tangible way too. That they
Yeah.
can relate that spiritual aspect. I guess just a quick tangent off of that too, because this has come up in prior conversations with other people that how there is maybe if not a pursuit, but just a want even to know why of something and not just because I'm told to do this, right? Or told not to do this. So I guess is that something that you feel like adds or is a part of the your at least how you would interpret Islam and your faith, that sort of understanding is also part of what you're trying to do as well, that's consistent with that Islamic perspective? Or is it something that is just a tool that you use to try to get people to understand the message of that health message you're trying to send?
I guess I'll speak for myself because when people connect with religion and spirituality, it can come from a multitude of avenues, and everyone is different. I know for myself, when I started really looking into Islam, and I was raised in a Muslim family, but I think at some point in everyone's life, we all have to make a choice if we're going to be Muslim and choose to identify. And it was really for me when I entered into college and when I started to pursue really looking into Islam when I was in college,
Mhm.
despite being identifying as Muslim my whole life, but really lacking a lot of the knowledge behind it. I really wanted questions that I had in my head being answered of why is this haram? Why is this halal? Why are there conditions around this? And why is that? And why I wanted to know the why. And I noticed that when I started seeking knowledge on the whys, I really appreciated the answer back. It actually started to make
Mm.
me really fall in love with the religion. It was the answers to my whys that made me realize this religion is for me. This is a perfect religion to me, and I fully embrace it. And I think that when I wanted to teach particularly health education to youth, whether it was a discussion on, for some youth, it's why can't we date, or why are there certain
Mm.
conditions or boundaries around gender interaction, for example. I enjoyed talking about now you're asking a why question. So which I think is important. So let's go into that why. What are the risks that come with premarital relations? What are the mental risks, the physical, the social, the spiritual risks? And let's just not focus on the ruling of it, but let's focus on the why. And then tell me your thoughts about that. And it's something in which when you can look at something more in a concrete way, or when there's evidence behind it, there's a lot of medical evidence behind the risks that come with premarital relations, that whether you're Muslim or not, you can't disagree with the facts or disagree with the research behind it. So then what's the ultimate conclusion that you're going to gain from this? That you want to really limit those types of interactions, or you really want to be mindful of who you choose as a partner, those types of things that someone with logic and with wisdom would come to that conclusion. And
Mm.
alhamdulillah, Allah has, out of his love and care for you, sometimes we look at his boundaries as he's not creating boundaries to burden you or to make your life difficult. He's creating those boundaries because out of love and out of care for you, ultimately. And when you look at it in that type of way, you really look at Allah as he's really the only one who has your best interest in mind. And so when I wonder, why can't we do this and everyone's doing that? Because he ultimately has the wisdom to know that it is what's best for you. And so that's the ultimate goal
Mm.
of looking at health in that kind of way, is that it can, because a lot of health questions that youth will ask or that youth have nowadays really very much sync up with their feelings towards Islam, whether it's
Oh.
sex or it's about substance abuse or it's about mental health issues, that a lot of the questions or issues and concerns that they have around Islam really actually do center around health. So health is really a big component to impacting a person's spirituality in today's time, especially the LGBTQ community, or when we talk about abortion, or we talk about contraception, or finding a partner. These are all health issues. So these are having health discussions with Muslim youth can really fuel an interesting spiritual discussion that can really get youth talking about how they even feel about Islam, right? Because these kind of
Mhm.
questions come about that could open up that type of conversation.
That is really fascinating that I've never thought about it that way too, that it's almost that learning about your body it can almost be a gateway to even learning more about your own faith and your own spirituality too, and what sort of relationship you choose to have with God or not, depending on that. Is
Yeah,
that a
yeah.
fair way to say that, do you think, or is that?
I would say from my experience, I would see that a lot of I do lead youth halakas, and so sometimes we won't even have a health topic, for example. Like we'll come in and we'll talk about something else, for example. Like we'll talk about patience or we'll talk about something like
Mm.
that. But sometimes it does always lean back into, a spirituality discussion. But honestly, when you think about, just from my experience, I'll just speak for myself, but
Mhm.
when I talk with youth about, when I ask them, what kind of topics do you want to talk about? SubhanAllah, it's interesting because a lot of the times those top topics, the main topics that youth want to talk about is usually sex, dating, marriage, and sometimes a lot of these social political issues that are happening in today's time. A couple
Mhm.
years ago with Roe versus Wade, a lot of youth were really interested on what's the Islamic perspective on abortion. And so that was a really hot topic. And a lot of youth programming were asking, can you give a discussion on that? And so these types of things really do impact a youth's mindset when it comes to spirituality. LGBTQ as well is a big topic that a lot of youth, well, what's the Islamic framework and how are we to interact? And they have this beautiful religion that teaches about tolerance and teaches about that the religion doesn't change, yet we are not to dehumanize anyone. And our religion never teaches us to treat people in that type of manner. We are to be tolerant of others, but at the same time, our religion teaches us that people are to be tolerant of us. So we can stand up for ourselves, and as long as it's respectful, in always a respectful way. But those types of things, these types of topics, I think a lot of youth they ask about. And so these are essentially health questions. Another one is women's health, or sorry, women's rights. Women's rights is a big discussion, and this falls under social health. And so looking at what is the Islamic understanding of particular women's rights issues, and how does Islam view equality, that Islam respects and appreciates equality, but also Islam recognizes that men and women have dispositional, not just physical, but dispositional, psychological issue differences as well. And so to treat both genders entirely equal fails with justice as well. So Islam has a beautiful concept of
Mhm.
incorporating equity. So that does take into account the biological differences. And so it creates this balance of that men and women are complementary to each other, that we're allies to each other, that our differences aren't meant to compete with each other, but they're meant to bring each other together and to allow society to function best when we highlight those differences. But when we don't have differences, that we are to be treated in that equal fashion. So again, this is a
Mhm.
social health concept. So teaching it within that framework or talking about it, that's how I like to approach topics in that type of fashion, is within the realm of health
Mhm.
or within that type of research or evidence-based knowledge, also incorporating that Islam is there one kind of, inshallah, hoping, aiming to create that balance between the two.
I get you bring up really good points that I guess has there ever been a circumstance or something where you've either refuted that concern that if either a parent or even a child or with these halakas or these educational sessions where you've gotten any pushback that even talking about a thing that could be used the wrong way, or that alcohol or premarital sex or something, that even just talking about it could lead you to the wrong way. And so there's such a paradigm sometimes of just not talking about a thing and just blindly following it. And I know you brought that up before too, but I guess, is there an example or something where you remember that how that actually talking about the thing either helped you spiritually as well too, or like you saw that in a child?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because I think when you talk about, for example, we give the topic of reproductive and sexual health, or even something as sexual desire, or things like just the desire to be intimate, or the desire to want to act out on that, even if one is not married, such as like masturbation or pornography, that there are some parents, for example, who may worry and say, if you talk about it, then you're going to put it in their head and then they're going to actually
Mhm.
want to engage in it. And so if you just leave the topic alone, then actually that's protective. But research has found that's not actually true. When you talk to your child about these topics, and you get to be a part of that conversation, you're proactive in it, you're able to then create an environment, inshallah, that enables them to ask questions. And then they're left with giving them the proper decision-making skills on how to utilize that knowledge. And so now you've given them the ability to sift through what is safe, what is unsafe for them, what is appropriate, what is inappropriate. When we talk about like issues of consent, and we talk about issues of like body boundaries, like you've given them that knowledge. But if you don't talk about it and you just assume that you're protecting them, that's not the case. And so sometimes there is a little bit of pushback of these are topics that they fall outside of modesty in Islam, or they fall outside of haya. But when we look at examples from the seerah, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he showed that it's not inappropriate to ask questions nor teach it. It's how you teach it and how you address it, that's what needs to be done with modesty. So you still address the issues, but you address them in a modest fashion, but you should address them and it's appropriate. There are reproductive and sexual health, they are probably the most common topics that are discussed in books of fiqh. And so you'll see so many topics, and our tradition does not shy away from it. We have verses in the Quran that talk about it, and we're not to skip those verses or tell youth you can't read those verses yet. And there's a hadith that talk about it. We have examples of hadith about when someone has a wet dream and how they are to handle that situation by making ghusl. And there's a Sahaba who that happened to him and he was uncomfortable asking it because to him it was a shyness. And so he had someone ask on his behalf. But you see how he still sought out the information. He just did it in his modest fashion. And so these are examples of how, when we're dealing with an issue or we're struggling with something, whether it's sexual desire or maybe it's even a mental health issue, that we are to seek those who have knowledge and to ask them for help. And we as parents or teachers or educators or professionals, that we are to take proactive measures to teach, but do so within those conditions of being considerate of youth and that they are very impressionable, that we are to use language that is very mindful of their developmental age, but it doesn't mean we just don't talk about it. There has to be a balance. It's not that one comes in and is very vulgar and graphic. This is not of the Sunnah as well. To having that balance. So it's just letting parents know that it's not like it's one extreme or another, but we find that middle path, as Islam is a religion of the middle path.
Yeah, oh, mashallah, that makes a lot of sense there. And so obviously I concur a lot with what you're saying too, and it seems like it makes a lot of sense. Is there anything about what you do that you don't like? Or that the 20%, the whole 80/20 thing, right? Is there anything that frustrates you or that you're like, ugh, why did I decide to do this?
It's a tough question because it's hard to find something that I don't like. It's definitely I don't look at it so much as a job. I truly do enjoy what I do. I think maybe the one thing that I guess I could say that the one thing that I don't like is that sometimes at the end of usually when I give a seminar, I teach something and I'll have youth offer some feedback just to ensure that they benefited or what they learned or any advice. And so if I feel like, or if I saw on the feedback that, maybe they're dealing with something and it wasn't addressed, then I always
Mm,
feel like, oh, I skipped something. Or I think that's something that I worry about because sometimes, especially in today's time, youth are dealing with such serious issues in today's time, whether it's we have youth who are dealing with suicidal ideation, who are dealing with cutting, who are dealing with pornography addiction, who are dealing with social media addiction, a lot of body image issues. And we're seeing this at younger and younger ages, a lot of bullying that's happening. And so there's just so many important and sensitive topics that it's very difficult to pick and choose which topic you want to address because
sure,
I feel
sure.
like it's just there's someone in the room who may be dealing with something that we just didn't have the time to talk about. And that's always something that's very difficult, which shows just how important it is for health education to just really be a normal part of tarbiyah or Islamic knowledge, whether it's, in the home between parent and child, at our weekend schools, our Islamic schools, in our masajid, in our communities, talking about these types of topics and having educators who are able to have these types of discussions with youth is so important because, and having mental health professionals that are available as well. It's something that we really need for our youth very much today. And I think that's something that I think is still that needs to be looked at and refocused on, inshallah.
Inshallah, yeah. No, and that leads to my last question for you too, and just that, especially for Muslims, I guess of any age, and maybe even just the ones that you typically speak to as well, what do you want them to know about being a health educator? And even just that career path or paths that are similar to health educator.
I think that if someone is, and I'll keep it broad here because health education is I don't know if not a made up, but when I went, it's
Sure.
weird because when I went into medical school and I enjoyed very much learning about medicine and I enjoyed learning about how the body worked and functioned. And then after that, I went and pursued a degree in Islamic studies. And I felt like when I walked away from both of these degrees, I really wanted to fuse them. I wanted them to come together in a way. And so it's not so much a created field, but I saw the value in the health knowledge that, alhamdulillah, Allah willed me to have, and then that Islamic knowledge. And I really wanted them to come together in a way. And I think for anyone out there who, maybe in a career path and may have certain interests that it's okay to think outside the box and put things together or move things around when it comes to if you see a need in your community, then that's something in which you think it could benefit, whether it's the greater community or anywhere. Inshallah, don't feel afraid to give it a try and think outside. Alhamdulillah, I will say that I did write a book series after teaching health education from an Islamic perspective for about 10 years. I really do hope that there are other people who may be interested in teaching health education from an Islamic framework to, I hope that there are more people who are interested in doing it. And so I did create a resource so that other educators can use it. Also, if someone wants to, but doesn't feel like they have maybe the confidence or the knowledge base to do so for a parent or for a teacher or even for a youth director at a masjid, I wrote a book series called Health and Wellness from the Islamic Perspective. It is 6 books, 6 level books, and there is a teacher's manual as well. And you can find it on noorart.com. And so if you're interested, and it covers a lot of different topics, there's topics, of course, on puberty, on healthy eating, on diet, exercise, on body image, self-esteem, social media usage like gaming and social media, and the effects that it can have on one's mental and spiritual health. There's topics, of course, on the different types of mental illness and suicide, which Dr. Rani Awad content edited. And there's chapters on substance abuse. And of course, there's discussions on sexual desire, genderism, same-sex attraction, marriage, contraception. Dr. Wahid Jensen, he content edited the genderism and LGBTQ chapter, or the same-sex attraction chapter. And of course, the Family and Youth Institute, Sister Dua Hagag, who is a mental health professional, she content edited the entire. So
It's
it's a work that
incredible.
was done by
Yeah.
many people. And of course, Imana was a big part of it as well. Genja Zalio, who is the graphic designer for Imana, he graphic designed the entire book series as well. And of course, the Noor Art team. So it was a collaborative effort by a lot of people. Inshallah, it's a great resource that hopefully other people may want to use. And inshallah, check it out. Hopefully, it'll be of benefit. But yeah, that's all. Hopefully, there will be other health educators out there and they'll be able to update this series and make more. This is the first health book series from an Islamic perspective. And I think one last thing that I will mention is health
Yeah.
curriculum is a big part of the public school system. It is pretty much required in a majority of public school settings. And health education or health curriculum from the KG to 12th grade, a lot of the topics are medically appropriate and accurate, and a lot of youth who are Muslim are benefiting from it. But there definitely are topics in it that are inconsistent with Islamic teachings or contradictory to Islamic teachings. And so being able to have a resource that has an Islamic framework can give our youth an opportunity to see things in a different light, in a different perspective. And so that way they can have this contrast and comparison where they can think things a little bit differently and say, okay, our health curriculum taught that when it comes to alcohol, that you wait until you're 21, or you think about safe drinking. But in that Islamic framework, it focused more on why is it prohibited no matter how old you are and what is the benefit of that. So it gives them a different way of thinking about things.
Yeah. No, and I think what I'm so glad you brought that up because I was going to bring it up otherwise. But remind us again the title, and I'll make
It's,
sure there's a link to the in the info. Yeah.
yeah, it's called Health and Wellness from an Islamic Perspective.
Perfect. And I think the thing why I think it's such an important asset to the community at large, regionally, globally, is because you do a really good job of mixing, I think, or not mixing, but just complementing the science and the faith spiritual perspective of things that are just very real front and center for everyone. And obviously it's tailored to sometimes a younger generation or like school age. But if you are gained, or if you are able to gain that knowledge at that age and be even more empowered when you go out into the world, you're just going to be a much better, or you're that would hope that inshallah you're just going out into the world much better prepared, and then to be able to fight off whatever future tests you would have then.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I think the main goal of this book series is that my aim was that it is a preventive intervention. That when you give tools, when you give youth the tools to think about things in different types of ways that may not often be talked about in certain cultures or certain societies, that you're giving them decision-making skills to think about things in a different way, more from a moral framework that, inshallah, I hope aligns with Islamic theology. And it gives them that ability to, as they get older, make decisions that are good for their not just spiritual well-being, but definitely for their mental and physical well-being as well. So yeah, inshallah, I hope it does serve as a preventive intervention for our youth today. And of course, for adults that may be interested, it's another way of looking at things that we often, us being a little bit older, health education was something that was quite limited or optional when we were younger. And so it never surprises me. It used to, but not so much anymore, that there's a lot of adults out there that were never given health education, and there's a lot that they don't know. And there's a lot of adults will ask, is there a health education class that adults can take? And this is some book series that may be able to fulfill some of that knowledge, but there's many works as well. But you're never too young to learn about health, especially when it comes to your mental and physical well-being. So inshallah, hopefully it's a
Right.
benefit to everyone. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much, Umar, for sharing your story about it too, what drove you to this, and then much like culminating in an actual project and an actual dawah that you can give to everyone and then with that knowledge. So thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us about this and sharing that knowledge.
Thank you so much, Mariam. I really appreciate it. And I will say that it's funny because Mariam and we've gone back several years, and it was before or when I first met Mar. I think it was 2015. I don't, maybe could have
Probably. Yeah.
been
Yeah.
2015. And I remember we were talking about, I was just teaching reproductive and sexual health, and Mariam and we went back and forth about the idea of writing something or having something in writing. And that's really when it really went into me. Yes, why don't we have our own resource? We should have our own
Mhm.
resource. There's so much health within our Quran and the Sunnah. We have Islam is a religion where science and religion are not at a discourse. They're very much
Mhm.
congruent. And so we can have all of this information, inshallah, for our youth with topics that are hopefully of need for them. And Jazakallah to Mariam very much, because she was very much a part of that brainstorming process. And one of the conferences that I attended, it's an education. And
Yeah.
I went with, I spoke on behalf of Amana Education. And one of the things that we talked about was, are you Islamic school teachers, administrators, principals here today, would you be interested in a health resource? And majority, if not all of them, the feedback that I got was, yes, absolutely. We need this. We are years behind
Oh,
on this. And that really was that push to, okay, now I feel like there's a fard kifaya here. Like it's a communal
mhm.
obligation here where if we can do this and get it done, then inshallah, hopefully it'll be a benefit to our community. Jazakallah
Right.
to you, Mariam, and to everyone who was a part of it as well. It's definitely a collaborative effort, and hopefully, inshallah, I hope it benefits the community.
And you know what? Maybe we could even have you come back and even do installments, right? About certain topics and just make it even about that science and faith connection too. So who
Yeah, that
knows?
would be great.
Inshallah, we can
Yeah.
do that. Yeah. And hopefully it won't take another 9 years.
Do that.
No, but thank you so much again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Jazakallah, Mariam.